Welcome to Now in the 90s, where we look at the game releases of 30 years ago. Today, this week, an obscure fighter, a cyberpunk adventure game, and yet another strategy game. Hi, I'm your host Jared, and today is January 27th, 1993. It's as generic as it sounds. Released this week in 1993 for the Super NES, was Power Moves. Power Moves is a one-on-one fighting game. Duke it out as one of 8 playable characters, each with their own special moves and fighting styles. You can also shift between the foreground and background to avoid attacks. In single player, you earn points after battles that you can use to increase your stats, increasing your attack power, jumping ability, health, and more. Power Moves on the SNES is actually a port. The original game was for the Sega Genesis, where in Japan, it was originally titled Power Athlete. When it came to the West for Sega, the name was changed to Deadly Moves. That box art for Sega has a guy getting punched in the face so hard, blood is erupting out of his cheek. It's widely believed that in order to keep up with Nintendo's family-friendly policies, it was changed to Power Moves, and the box art's blood was changed to, I don't know, Capri Sun? Besides that, there are no differences between the Sega and Nintendo versions. Not that it matters because the game sucks pretty bad. It's one of those fighting games where you have a punch button, a kick button, and a jump button. You do not press up to jump. Also, when you play the single player mode, you can only play as one character, the one named Joe. There isn't even a special final boss, it's just one of the other playable characters from the Versus mode. It's one thing to be painfully generic, but Power Moves is also just painful. Even the publisher, Kaneko, didn't have much faith in it. So little that when they printed magazine advertisements, they didn't screenshot actual gameplay. Instead, they had really amateurish drawings trying to demonstrate what the game may or may not look like. The blurbs also straight up lie, stating things like weather and seasons change during gameplay, and 3D screens add to realism, all with an asterisk stating that the screens are only a representation. This behavior shouldn't surprise you if you're familiar with the publisher Kaneko. Their most well-known game released in the West was Chester Cheetah, Too Cool to Fool. Some ports do get better at least. Released this week in 1993 was Rise of the Dragon for the Sega CD. Rise of the Dragon is a point-and-click adventure game set in a cyberpunk future that isn't shy about its inspirations from Blade Runner. The mayor's daughter has turned up dead, and they hire you, an ex-cop, to solve the mystery of her death. Everything you would expect from a point-and-click adventure is here. Collecting items, talking to NPCs, and trying every dialogue option until you find progress, and instant unexpected deaths for clicking the wrong thing. There are also some side-scrolling action stages where you walk, crouch, and shoot enemies with unresponsive, janky controls. Rise of the Dragon was originally for DOS computers in 1990 and then onto the Amiga in 1991. The Sega CD version comes with a very major, notable upgrade: voice acting. This includes veteran voice actors such as Tress MacNeille, Jim Ward, and Cam Clark as the main character, William Blade Hunter. I actually really like this game. I played it for the first time not too long ago over on my gameplay channel and got really close to beating it. That is until my Sega CD broke and stopped reading the disc. Feel free to check out those videos. The voice acting is an absolute treat.
There you go, baby. Have a nice trip. Oh my God.
Rise of the Dragon was well loved on PCs. It got lots of 9 out of 10s and 5 out of 5s. When it came to the Sega CD version, it was a bit more criticized. Electronic Gaming Monthly gave it a tiny review in their June 1994 issue, with their only criticism being the lack of replay value. And since its Sega CD release, Rise of the Dragon has never been re-released on any other platform. Other PC games got ported to home consoles, with Overlord for the NES, released this week in 1993. Overlord is a strategy simulation game. Pick from one of 4 planetary systems, manage your planets, your people, and your finances. Purchase battle cruisers, tanks, and more to explore the galaxy and attack opponents. You can also equip your soldiers, colonize more planets, and spy on enemies. When combat happens, it'll switch to a single-screen shoot-'em-up of sorts, where you maneuver your ship around to shoot enemy targets. Overlord was originally released on Amiga, MS-DOS, and Commodore 64 home computers, where it was titled Supremacy, Your Will Be Done. One of the original developers was David Perry, who is also known for making classics like Disney's Aladdin for Sega, Cool Spot, and Earthworm Jim. The NES version is understandably simpler, with less mechanics and more streamlined options. It's still impressive for an NES game, with great UI graphics and readable icons. Overlord on the NES was published by Virgin Games, which they make sure you know by their omnipresent logo in every text box in the game. Upon its release, it was pretty ignored, considering how young the general audience of the NES was at the time, and most people already moving on to 16-bit consoles. Overlord had very limited appeal on the home console. Still, GamePro magazine reviewed and called it, quote, an 8-bit masterpiece, and then graded it with an average score of a 3.75 out of 5. Reviews used to make no sense at the time. As for everything else, here's editor Dylan.
Andre Agassi Tennis released this week. Agassi? Agassi, thank you. And surprise, surprise, it's just okay. Tennis is one of those sports that is just begging for unique spins on gameplay. Maybe we'll find some new kooky tennis ideas on the Genesis with Wimbledon Championship Tennis, a game based around a no-nonsense, by-the-book tennis establishment. Who knows, crazier things have happened. I covered the Game Gear version in November, saying it was extraordinarily average, and then I proceeded to lose my shit over Crashing the Boys. But is the home console counterpart of Wimbledon any better? Yes, actually, way better. Much more detailed animations, more in-depth character choices with differing stats, and the soundtrack is great. It's even better than Andre Agassi's music. I just wish it would play during a match instead of, only used for menus. But of all the games that came out this week, I gotta give it up to Summer Assault on the TurboGrafx 16. A puzzle platformer where an evil sorceress enslaves monsters to rule the world. The only thing that could stop her is a slinky. With googly eyes. Need I say more? Yes. You play as a sentient slinky with guns, climbing walls, gathering upgrades, navigating labyrinthian levels, and taking out giant bosses. The movement takes some getting used to, like jumping between platforms and changing the trajectory of your shots depending on the angle of your slinky. But it is so unique, even by today's standards, that I can't help but sing its praises, which leaves us with a grand total of 8 games on the Somersault. I just realized it's a play on Somersault. Wow, I'm dumb. Anyway, 8 games came out on these 5 consoles this week in 1993. Thanks to this show, I constantly learn about new obscure games that I never would have looked twice at, let alone play. And hopefully at some point we can introduce you to some games that become future favorites from the past. Happy Friday, everybody!
Thanks, Dylan. Power Moves is dumb and not worth much. A single cartridge is right at $11, and a complete one is only $40. Rise of the Dragon is surprisingly common for a Sega CD game. A loose disc goes for under $25, and a complete one is barely $10 more. Overlord is this week's biggest value gainer, but not by much. A copy of the game goes for $30, and a complete in-box copy, which includes a poster of the box art, goes for $76. And that's it for today. Next week, another adventure game, an explosive mascot, and more Dungeons and Dragons. I'm your host, Jared, and this was Now in the 90s. Thank you so much for watching Now in the 90s. I want to thank some patrons like Common CJ and Alcast. Please like the video and leave a comment down below and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you already are a subscriber, thank you so much for watching this every single Friday. I wasn't joking when we said that Rise of the Dragon for the Sega CD is surprisingly common. To help give you an idea, I have Rise of the Dragon for the Sega CD twice. I don't know how that happened.